here we are, John.
Hi, Jared.
Sat on the sofa,
Hey.
talking about Central America. We just need a cold beer in our hands, really. That would be
Oh,
really,
mate, that would be fantastic.
Let's talk about Central America.
Central America.
And let's start with Costa Rica. Now, Costa Rica is sort of almost like the poster boy of sustainable regenerative travel. You know, more than 25% of Costa Rica is national park. You know, that's the figure that always gets thrown out there, doesn't it? To give evidence, if you like, of just what they're doing on the ground and how enlightened their conservation policies are. It's been booming for steps for the last 3 or 4 years. You know, our clients clearly love it, and I know it's a place that you feel very passionate about. What is it that makes it so great?
What is Costa Rica?
What is it?
What is Costa Rica? Costa Rica, okay, first of all, it's an absolute delight to work with Costa Rica. I mean, I've been kind of sending people to Costa Rica for around 20 odd years now, and Costa Rica works. You know, it is an exciting destination. It still has the ability to surprise me and the people I send there, but it's a reliable country. It's probably, I'd say, one of the most sophisticated of the Central American countries in terms of the quality of service, the quality of guiding, and the range of accommodation available, and again the quality of accommodation. It works on so many levels, and you know what I always enjoy are people coming back, filling in their post-travel questionnaires, and telling me how good a job our agents did on the ground. But it's not just about that. It's about the experience. It's about the nature, and this is what Costa Rica does so well. It obviously protects the very resource. It draws people to Costa Rica, the environment, nature. But it conjures up some quite creative ways of propelling you into that environment. So that there's all kinds of ways you can explore the different biospheres of Costa Rica. And the joy of Costa Rica is that for a relatively small country, there's some very different environments, very different biospheres, from the wetlands to cloud forest to rainforest to dry forest, and even off the coast, what's underwater. And you know, all of those different biospheres can be easily combined in a relatively short trip. And you know, the imaginative ways that you can explore that include zipping through the trees on a zip line. You can raft down a river. You can do just an easy bit of hiking, snorkeling. So Costa Rica has all of that, but it's principally about the environment. It's principally about nature. It's about the 4 species of monkeys, 6 species of cats, and possibly the most remarkable bird in Central America, the resplendent quetzal, which is right up there on everybody's wish list.
And so how likely is it that you will see a resplendent quetzal in Costa Rica?
Going back 10 years ago, I'd say it was 50-50. Honestly now, it's got to be up there around 90% chance. I mean, there's 2 main areas of cloud forest in Costa Rica, which is the habitat for the resplendent quetzal, and you know, we take people to both of those areas. Probably the less well known and the less developed is a place called San Gerardo de Doctor, on the way south in Costa Rica towards Panama. It's a simpler accommodation there, but the guides are just tremendous. They know where the birds are going to be, and I must say that they're like colour explosions. It's like a pot of shiny metallic paint of
it is the holy grail, isn't it? It is the holy grail for so many birds.
It is, and also the cultural history. I mean, it was very important to the Mayans.
So that's interesting. You mentioned the cultural history, because Costa Rica is often pigeonholed as a wildlife destination. And understandably, because it has such an embarrassment of riches when it comes to the biodiversity in Costa Rica. But talk a little bit about that cultural side to Costa Rica, and I'm interested also to come back on what you said about the guides. But let's what about the people of Costa Rica?
The people are extraordinary, welcoming and friendly. It perhaps lacks compared to some of its neighbours in the cultural interest. I mean, there is a little bit of archaeological interest. There's one main archaeological site called Guayabo, which, it does deserve to be visited, albeit for a few hours. There's some interesting stone spheres in the south that nobody's quite sure what the origins were, but the size of them apparently related to the importance of the chief. But that's about it. You'll be welcomed. There are indigenous groups of people in Costa Rica, but chiefly it's all about what you see in the forest, under the water. It's about nature, it's about wildlife. And a consequence of Costa Rica doing this so well has meant that it's right up there in terms of probably one of the most popular nature and wildlife destinations in the region. And so we've seen over the last few years its popularity kind of increase.
It's in high demand, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
in high demand, and often with that, as you say, you do have an issue sometimes with footfall. You need to know the places to avoid, the times to avoid, and I know price as well. I know you've said to me a few times now that these prices are going up quite a bit with Costa Rica. How do you sort of manage that? It's a tricky one.
It's a challenge. Costa Rica, I've seen the trend in the pattern is to go for luxe, go for high-end lodges, go for the higher part of the market.
Which the country's renowned for.
Which it is renowned for. But what Costa Rica has done so well with some of these remote lodges, which are very comfortable, they tend to be very small. They'll fill up quickly. And so during that drier season, the time that most people want to visit, January to March, when there's least humidity, best chance of clear skies and little rain, that combined with the fact that BA only fly there, they're the only direct scheduled airline, and they only fly seasonally over that the dry season means that a lot of the visits to Costa Rica happen over that period.
That bottleneck. Yeah.
And so there are times when we struggle to get people into the country. And actually, just to say on that note, and to that end, there has been a change. I try and get people away from perhaps the busier area in the north and the better known tourist sites like the Arenal volcano. But even so, it's a challenge. It is a challenge.
Yeah. I suppose it's typical really of how we try and do things all over the world. Over tourism is an issue, we know that, but that doesn't mean to say you avoid going to countries that might have problems with over tourism. It's just thinking a little bit outside of the box, looking at different parts of that country, or going to that country at a different time of year, for example. As long as our clients are flexible and are prepared to listen to the advice, then there's usually a solution. And sometimes it might mean actually, let's look elsewhere. For example, if somebody comes to us and has a budget that perhaps Costa Rica isn't going to be right for, then what do you do? What do you tend to do?
Neighbouring countries. And Jared, I know that you're a bit of a fan of Nicaragua.
that was a big bit of scaffolding, wasn't it? Just to enable me to talk about Nicaragua.
I thought it was a professionally done segue, actually. But
is that what they call it?
I know you were bowled over. I mean, what was it about Nicaragua that appealed to you?
Definitely people, first and foremost. Awful overused word, authenticity, but there is an authenticity about the people in Nicaragua, and their story is such a fascinating one. More recent history as well as the history sort of way in the past. But also, of course, it has the natural landscape as well. I mean, it is on this huge chain of volcanoes that sort of follows the Pacific coast. And that landscape is incredibly dramatic, and it gives birth to really fertile soils, which means it is an extremely biodiverse country in its own right. I mean, not far off 800 odd different species of birds in Nicaragua.
That's incredible,
So-
because I mean, Nicaragua is known for the revolution, the Contras,
Yeah.
and that kind of more recent political tumult. But you know, not much is known about the kind of natural riches of Nicaragua.
No, you're right. It is overlooked, and understandably so, because the news media are very much focused on the revolution, and I think it is a big part of the story, which makes Nicaragua so fascinating. But from a wildlife point of view, I was lucky enough to go into Rio San Juan area.
Yeah.
So sort of Nicaragua, if you imagine, it's sort of like a country of two halves, isn't it? Really, you know, you've got the eastern side, which is on the Caribbean, which is very underdeveloped, and then you've got the western side on the Pacific, which is more developed and where more of the tourism tends to sort of congregate. Having said that, there's not a lot of people there from a tourism point of view, which is definitely one of the big bonuses, the big pluses of traveling in Nicaragua. And so you've got those two halves, and they're divided by this enormous great lake, Lake Nicaragua. And it is on that sort of Caribbean side, on the eastern side, where the greatest sort of biodiversity can be found, in that Rio San Juan area. So I stayed at a place called Guasimo Lodge, which is right on the Rio San Juan. The Rio San Juan runs all the way into the Caribbean, and connected to Lake Nicaragua, obviously. And from a birding point of view, I am a keen twitcher, it was an absolute joy. I mean, I saw, well, some of the highlights, a red-capped mannequin bird, which is this bird that people talk about, the Michael Jackson bird. awful nickname, but it's the bird that was probably made famous by David Attenborough on the BBC Natural History program, the one that sort of does that incredible dance along the branch of a tree. I'm not going to try and do it.
But you know, how did you, I mean, that is a remote area of Nicaragua down in the southwest, and so, you know, in Costa Rica they might get you there in a few hours, but you know, what are the challenges of getting to these more remote outposts?
You've got to want to get there, and that's
Right.
part of the appeal, I think. You know, it is proper traveling, if you like. You know, so from Managua we went over to Ometepe, which is the big island in the middle of Lake Nicaragua. A couple of volcanoes on that island, and a great place to sort of walk, and again, wonderful birding there. We saw a crested guan on one of the Ometepe, and Madeiras, on the Madeiras volcano, superb spot. And then we took another boat all the way across to the eastern shore of Lake Nicaragua, and then another boat all the way down the river to a place called El Castillo, which is a fascinating outpost. You know El Castillo.
Yeah, it's the old Spanish fortress, isn't it?
Yeah.
And not to forget that Henry Morgan came up.
Henry Morgan. So this whole area is famous for piracy.
Yeah.
And so Henry Morgan, he was one of many pirates that came up river. You've got to remember that back in the 18th century, the quickest way to get from New York to San Francisco was to actually go via Nicaragua, to go up the Rio San Juan and across Lake Nicaragua and out that way. So it became this really strategically important part of the world. Obviously with all of the gold boom and just trying to move that gold around, etc. So it has a really interesting history. Nelson fought at El Castillo. So the Spanish, they held up that castle because the castle was built because it was such an important part of the world, geographically and strategically. Nelson actually fought the Spanish at El Castillo, and one of the slopes leading up to the castle is known as Nelson Hill. So it's got a really interesting history. So you spend a night in El Castillo. The museum at the castle is superb, really interesting. Has complete English translation as well, which for somebody like me was an absolute essential. And then downriver to Guasimo Lodge, which is a really rustic but a great location on the river. Went out with a chap called Canales, who was the local guide. We went into an area known as the Indio Maze Biosphere, which I think runs across into Costa Rica as well, because you're really close to the border with Costa Rica there.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, it's a lot of traveling, but my goodness, worth all the traveling and all the sweat.
So it sounds like you have to put a little bit more effort into a Nicaragua trip.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, there's no direct flights. You can get there the same day with connections through the States. But you know, you reap what you sow, and so Nicaragua possibly has a broader variety of interests.
Definitely, and I think combining the west with the east. So on the western side, you've got Granada, you've got Leon. So you fly into Managua. Most people tend not to hang around in Managua because it's more of a functional capital, I would say. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty much any historic interest is gone.
It was wiped out by the earthquake, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but from Managua, head up into Granada and Leon. Both really interesting cities and very, very different as well. I mean, Leon is sort of referred to as the brain and heart of Nicaragua, and very much the sort of capital of revolution.
Yeah.
And you can walk along certain streets which are really just a celebration of revolutionaries. They have the Martyrs sort of alley and all of this sort of stuff. About lots of poets and sort of storytellers in Leon. And it's that kind of place. The people are very, very passionate about their history, and it's been a tough history. Let's not forget what they've been through. You used the word tumultuous, and I think you're absolutely right. These people have been through a hell of a lot, and the way they express that is often through beautiful poetry, through wonderful literature, and through wonderful art, like street art, graffiti, murals all over Leon.
But Leon's extraordinary for that, for the street art and the murals. But also, I mean, it will probably come as a surprise to know how important art is in Nicaragua. I mean, one of the finest, I think, galleries and art galleries in Central America is in Leon.
Yeah.
And not to forget sandboarding.
Yes, why on earth did I think that was a good idea? To throw myself down a huge volcano on a piece of wood.
I've seen the video footage of this. Jared assures me he was going at least 70 or 80 miles an hour. Actually go down.
I was not going to break any land speed records that day, that's for sure.
But it just reiterates the variety that Nicaragua has. So, that's not to discount Costa Rica. Costa Rica does the nature stuff incredibly well.
Yeah.
Nicaragua, a brilliant mix of cultural interest, historic interest. And that leads on to the whole idea of how integrated this part of the Americas is.
Yeah.
And Central America, I mean, I'm more and more regularly now putting together combinations of countries. I mean, El Salvador is a great example of a country which, just going back, I don't know, 7-8 years ago, was considered one of the most dangerous places in Central America. And now its fortunes are completely changed. And we're kind of fairly regularly sending people to San Salvador and out into El Salvador. And it combines well with Guatemala, Honduras, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, and of course going down to Panama as well.
Yeah.
So this region has huge variety.
We love that whole trans-border experience, don't we?
Yeah.
Here, and we talk about it a lot, not just for Central America, but in lots of different parts of the world. I think nothing gives you a greater understanding of a region than crossing, those sort of arbitrary lines. And I know we've got a 4x4 trip at the moment that we do in Costa Rica. And I was lucky enough to spend time with the partner we're working with there, and he was talking to me about some of the trips he does that go from Costa Rica into Nicaragua, or he goes right down from Costa Rica to the southernmost point of Central America in Panama. It's a fabulous trip. It's really adventurous, sort of, off the beaten track stuff.
Yeah, that Costa Rica 4x4 trip is this is a good time to do a little advert for that, actually, because
another perfect segue.
Yeah,
Everybody thought we
perfect
rehearsed
segue.
this.
But no, it is. It's really exciting. I mean, you know, not to say that I'm bored with selling Costa Rica. Far from it. It's a fantastic country and a great place to send people. But you know, it's rare that these kind of opportunities come up in Costa Rica to do something a little bit different. And you're right, the chap that we work with in Costa Rica, really creative. He's got a lot of local contacts and he takes people to some areas that you just wouldn't get access to in Costa Rica, some kind of really rural areas. And you know, he knows where you're able still in Costa Rica to drive in your 4x4 along stretches of the coast, along the beach, along kind of old riverbeds, through the rainforest. And in fact, you know, all the way down to the Osa Peninsula in the south, which is one of the best places for nature. So that brings us kind of full circle.
Yeah,
I think.
yeah. That 4x4 trip, I only did about 3 days with Gustavo, but memorable. I mean, we went up to Boca Topada, right up on the border with Nicaragua.
Yeah.
And you talk about going into areas, where a lot of tour operators really just don't think about. We were going into farming communities and, you know, huge, great pineapple plantations. And you think, well, hang on, this isn't what people come to Costa Rica for. But then the people you meet along the way are real, authentic people. You know, these are people that live off the land. And yeah, we met with them and learned a little bit about their lives and heard some of their stories. And it was a very different part of Costa Rica that you know, most tour operators tend to promote. But I think a really important one not to be overlooked. Going back to that whole issue of trying to innovate and look at, you know, different ways to deal with that over tourism issue.
Yeah. Well, just you know, recently, you know, yes, there are some, and quite rightly, popular routes in Costa Rica because they do combine some really important and different biospheres. But recently, I've started looking at taking people to more off the beaten track areas in Costa Rica, and there's actually a really interesting circuit which takes you to some quite remote lodges, wetlands near the border with Nicaragua, and yeah, you can still get away, get you know, off the beaten path in Costa Rica. But I suppose the important thing is, you know, we pitch it according to what people are looking for out of a trip. And Costa Rica can still provide that, but there's also adventure next door in the neighbouring countries.
Yeah.
And you know, as a whole, you know, we mentioned the border situation. I mean, these are all ridiculous borders, really. But you're right, that in a way that's an interesting exercise just to see the process of going over a border and how officious people can be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But,
yeah, and how the people on the other side of that border are really not that different to the
exactly.
the people you just sort of left behind.
Exactly, and
yeah,
you know,
subtle differences.
having spent time in these areas near the borders, you realise actually how porous the borders are.
Yeah, exactly.
And
that Nicaragua, Costa Rica one, very much so.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. People are moving to and fro.
One last thing and finish up. Come on, John. Give me your best, most memorable experience in Central America. Keep it clean.
Keep it clean. My best, most memorable experience in Central America. That's a tough one because there's been a lot of memorable experiences there. You know,
this is going to involve rum, isn't it?
Well, there has been rum. I actually one of my regrets was not going to Flor de Caña distillery. Flor de Caña rum, some of the best rum in Central America, full stop.
Yeah.
And you can visit in Nicaragua. But you know, getting away from wildlife, nature, I stood on the viewing platform of Miraflores lock gates in Panama, and honestly, I was absolutely hypnotized to spend an hour and a half there just staring at these big container ships and the whole process of them being lifted and lowered through the Panama Canal. And you know, I haven't got an engineering bone in my body really. It's you know, I can't even put up a shelf at home, But that was one of the most extraordinary things, and you know that the history of the canal is incredible. It's remarkable history.
So we can bring this back to Nicaragua, because of course that was going to be the original site of the canal. And going back to what we were saying about the Rio San Juan being used to sort of get across from Caribbean to the Pacific. The wildlife down there, the basilisk lizard, that was probably one of the highlights. You know, that's the sort of, they call it the Jesus Christ lizard, the one that runs on the surface of the water. That was definitely a big highlight for me. I love reptiles, so seeing some of the snakes in Nicaragua, that was another highlight. But I think the big standout for me was well, one or two things. Granada, going out to the Iletas, Granada, you know, that archipelago of about 300 odd islands, and just kayaking around there, and listening to the Montezumas, Upandolas, you know, those birds with that stereophonic kind of cool, wonderful. That was a highlight. But I think Leon and going out, we were there during the Easter week, so we were there on Good Friday, the Semana Santa, and we were able to see those wonderful sawdust murals that they create, you know, depicting the Passion of Christ. The carpets, exactly. Yeah. We went out to this wonderful little community just outside Leon, where they were creating those sawdust carpets on the ground, and it was just the most convivial atmosphere. The barbecues were going, the beers were flowing, the music was on, and it was just that wonderful feeling you get sometimes when you travel, when you think, yeah, I don't need to be anywhere else.
This is it.
Yeah. So, you know, I know our clients are a very discerning bunch, and they you know, they come to us with some interesting requests, you know, and I know one of the questions, I've heard you say it in the office enough times, you know, what can I do to make this trip really, really special for you? And it was interesting, I was talking to our guide in Nicaragua. The guides in Nicaragua, by the way, are brilliant. They're just so compassionate, they've got amazing stories to tell, so articulate and caring, but fun-loving as well. You know, I just love spending time with them in Nicaragua. But Rene was telling me about how we had some clients that were desperate to get on top of a volcano, and they weren't stupid enough like me to throw themselves down that volcano. But this week we went up to Tilica. We walked up to Tilica, and we managed to organise this for some clients. And he was telling me about how we got them up there sort of 6 o'clock in the morning, because you want to be there to see the sun come up. And of course, it isn't just about looking into the volcano, which of course the early colonizers, the religious men, the priests that came across from Spain, used to try and exorcise these volcanoes. You know, they talked about looking into the mouth of hell. So, you know, we got our clients to look into the mouth of hell, but when they then turned around, there was this beautiful breakfast laid out for them, unbeknown to them, which we managed to organise. And so I suppose it's all about really just, you know, making sure that, you know, we listen to what our clients want and deliver on that. I mean, in terms of the clients that you've come to, I know you've had some birders that have had pretty sort of exacting sort of requests, and delivering for them. I know you enjoy trying to rise to that challenge.
Yeah, I mean I mean, it's not a challenge certainly in Costa Rica. I mean the quality, just coming back to the quality of the guiding. I mean, you know, all the guides in Costa Rica are accredited. It's pretty rigorous, the training for the guides in Costa Rica, but to be a guide in Costa Rica, or to be involved in conservation, or, you know, involved with the national parks is you know, looked at as a well-respected career, and a really important job. So, you know, Costa Rica, I wouldn't say that clients could just come to us and give us a list of things that they demand that they're going to see. However, if there is something particular that people want to see, then we'll do our absolute best to make sure that a professionally trained guide will take you to an area that gives you as good a chance as possible of seeing that particular animal, the bird. So yeah, you can do that in Costa Rica. Well, with the neighbouring countries, you know, I'm surprised at again, going back to the quality of the guiding, in fact, one of the best guides that we're using at the moment is in El Salvador. Extraordinary man who he grew up through the Troubles, and he left El Salvador and he's returned there because that's where his heart is, and you know, he takes huge pride in showing people actually how magnificent his country is.
People often sort of say to me, you know, about, oh, tell us what it is you do, and I will often sort of say, well, of course we're a tour operator, but actually we're quite similar to a dating agency. So it's about connecting people, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's, you know, listening to what people want, what it is that's going to make their trip, their holiday special, and finding the people on the ground who can really satisfy whatever curiosity it is that they have, whatever interest it is that they have. I think that's so important. Travel is so much about storytelling.
Yeah.
And therefore it needs somebody on the ground who can you know, pick up that narrative and articulate it in an engaging, informed yet passionate way.
Yeah, no, it's the engaging stuff. I mean, you know, it's not enough to know the facts, the figures, the length of this river, the date that this building was created. You know, it's about personal skills. It's about how people interact with you when you're visiting the country. And, you know, I don't know about you, but for me, it's kind of 50-50. I want to hear all about that person's life. I want to understand what living in the country is about, what that means to them.
But for somebody in El Salvador or Nicaragua, you know, that you need to tread carefully with that. There are certain sensitivities there, and I know in Nicaragua our guides, you know, were happy to talk, but at the same time they were mindful of where they were at the time they were talking, and some of the stories they told were incredibly sad and touching, and you feel you don't want to encroach too much, but I think what was evident to me was that there was a real desire to talk and to make sure that those stories were out there and shared. And interesting, I mean, the pride they had in the not only their country but in where they came from was really interesting. Rene was from Granada, and he sort of said, yeah, people from Leon, they referred to them, I can't remember what the Spanish is, but it basically means skeleton, because they think people from Leon are sort of very abstemious and you know, they don't enjoy life so much. They're quite strict with themselves, sort of thing. Whereas people from Granada, they're referred to as, I think, the tombucos, the you know, big bellies, because they love life and they live life to the full, but you know, they're quite profligate and all these kind of things. And he said to me, you know, Granada is Nicaragua. And then in the next breath he said, and people from Leon, they think we're big-headed. They think we're arrogant. I'm like, Rene.
Actually, just one final thing for me. I mean, you know, about what our guides, what can your guide do for your clients? Yeah. What can your guide provide you with? We very recently had some clients who came back from El Salvador. And we told them it was the client's birthday, and you know, we wanted to note it in some way or fashion. And no, it wasn't enough for our El Salvadorian guide just to buy them a birthday cake or a drink or something. The client woke up at about 7 o'clock in the morning. The guide had been out. It was setting off fireworks from the village square to celebrate and let everybody in town know that it was his birthday, our client's birthday. So, I mean, that is going a bit above and beyond, but, you know, a great example of imagination.
Yeah, absolutely.